Chapter 2. A condition called cerebral palsy. I have cerebral palsy. It feels good to admit that today after all these years. How was I able to hide this fact? It wasn't easy. According to the United Cerebral Palsy National website, cerebral refers to the brain and palsy refers to muscle weakness / poor control. Cerebral palsy itself is not progressive. The brain damage does not get worse. Is it neither communicable nor is it a disease? Cerebral palsy is instead a term used to describe a group of chronic illnesses affecting body movement and muscle coordination. It's caused by damage to one or more specific areas of the brain, usually during fetal development or shortly after birth, or even from an injury during infancy. Thus, these disorders were not caused by problems in the muscles or nerves themselves. Instead, faulty development or motor or damage to the motor area in the brain disrupts the brain's ability to adequately control movement and posture. In short, my brain does not communicate well with my body, particularly my muscles. More than 764,000 children and adults in the United States manifest one or more of the symptoms of cerebral palsy. A common trait includes muscle spasticity, sudden involuntary muscle spasms. The uncontrolled movement or tremor is typically the result of poor muscle tone and as well as rigidity. And since the brain is not always in charge, when you have cerebral palsy, legs and arms can sometimes take on a life of their own. I struggle with this still, especially when I'm tired or nervous, and the shaking during my duck walk attempt at the recruitment center that day was only one symptom of many. Sorry. The rigidity I experience is continuous. I don't even notice it anymore. I've had people who know about my condition ask me if I'm in pain, and my answer is zen, like if pain is constant, or is it even pain, or is it merely my normal state of being? The perpetual tension also makes my muscles work twice as hard, resulting in my body becoming fatigued easily. When muscles are working overtime at being tight and rigid, they don't have much energy to spare. Most CP sufferers exhibit moderate to severe muscular weakness. Cerebral palsy can affect skeletal development. Many muscles work in opposition, such as the ones in the legs. When one muscle in the pair tightens up so rigidly that it's almost paralyzed, as in a child with cerebral palsy, the bones that these muscles are attached to may not grow properly. The result is often skeletal abnormalities such as one leg longer than the other one shoulder higher, and a misalignment of hips and spine. In my case, the rigidity in the muscles supporting my thigh bones caused an inward twisting of the hips, thighs, and knees, and as I grew, I became pigeon-toed and bow-legged with a scissor-like shuffling gait. As a child, I had eyes that would wander independently of one another. Kids in school would point at me and laugh. When I spoke, I talked to the ground. Instead of looking at the person, embarrassed and ashamed of my appearance. My eye condition also made reading and learning difficult. Many children with cerebral palsy have a tough time in mainstream classes. This is usually due to a mental retardation resulting from the injury that caused the CP or possibly vision defects such as mine. To help correct my eyesight, I was prescribed thick, heavy glasses to wear during the day. Boy, were they ugly. I'm sure those glasses helped me learn to read and write, but they did nothing for my popularity or self-esteem. While everyone else played kickball, I stayed close to the school building, not wanting to participate in any physical activity. I was teased, shamed, and forced to grow a thick skin at a very early age. Wearing my corrective shoes in 1965, I also had to wear a patch over my eye at night. The patch was placed over my stronger eye, which forced my weaker eye. My stronger right eye, which forced my weaker left eye to focus and tighten. Focus and tighten up the muscles that control eye movement. Of course, as a kid, I really couldn't understand. I couldn't really comprehend the medical reasoning behind this protocol. All I knew was that I hated my wandering eyes in the daily patch regimen. I detested my glasses and chunky orthotic shoes too. They made me different and I didn't like it. My parents were apparently in denial back then and never openly discussed the fact that I had cerebral palsy. Not once did they sit me down in a chair and say, "John, you have a physical condition called cerebral palsy, and here's what we know about it." Because of this, I did zero research on CP until I was in my 20s. What caused it? Will it get worse? Will it get better? What can I do to help myself? Growing up, I didn't think to ask. I just accepted it. Many years later, I asked my mom about the dinner, lack of discussion regarding my diagnosis. We were drinking. Regarding my diagnosis, We were drinking iced tea and relaxing in our kitchen. My father had my father had passed away a few years earlier. She explained that Dad had intentionally set up set the stage when I was younger, not by denying or ignoring my symptoms, but by choosing to make a decision based on a parent's concern for the future of his child. I'll tell you something that was very important to your father, she said. Your dad never wanted the fact that you had cerebral palsy noted on any of your medical records. He was very clear to the doctors at Children's Hospital about this. Why was that, Mom? Because he didn't want you to be labeled handicapped or disabled as you got older, like your sister Kathy. But Mom, I was handicapped. Not to your father and me, in fact, she said, leaning back in her chair and warming up to the story. I can clearly picture the meeting in 1967 where we first learned of your condition. Dad and I were seated around a large conference table at Children's Hospital with a bunch of doctors in their white coats. Thank you for coming, Mr. and Mrs. Quinn. Dr. Jennings, your family doctor, speaks highly of the Quinn house and especially this wonderful little boy, John. Thanks for taking the time here, everyone, Dad said as he stood for introductions all around. For those who don't know me, my name is Ed and this is my wife Shirley. Although of slight build, Dad was an imposing man nonetheless. He had ink black hair combed straight back, a firm jawline and deep-set brown eyes that could drill you to the wall from across the room. By contrast with his blonde curls and quiet demeanor, Mom served as the perfect foil to Dad's intimidating presence. She even stood a few inches shorter, almost by design. They shared a worried look as Dad sat down and the meeting commenced. Ed, Shirley, the reason that we are here today is to give you the results of the testing that was conducted on John last month. All we want is to finally get a straight answer as to what is wrong with our boy, Dad said, staring at the far corner of the room where I was scribbling in a coloring book. I know that this process has been frustrating and difficult for you and your wife. We appreciate your patience. Hopefully we can address many of your questions today. Surely, for the benefit of everyone at this table, can you please give us a rundown of your concerns? Sure, well, Johnny is 4.5 years old, and we are ready to place him into kindergarten next fall, but you have some reservations. Yes, for one, he is not very coordinated. What do you mean, Shirley? Well, he didn't learn to walk with any confidence until a year or so ago. A year or so ago, I understand that he is slow in his motor development. Yes, he didn't learn to pull himself up onto his feet until he was about Yes, he didn't. Yes, he didn't pull himself up onto his feet until he was about 15 months old. I'd say Johnny was 2 years old when he began walking more than crawling. I see. What about playing with other children, his brothers and sisters? How does he get along? Socially, he gets along great. He is a smiling, happy little boy, but physically, physically he struggles, said my dad. In what way, Ed? He cannot run very well and has a hard time keeping up with everyone. The same with climbing the stairs. He has He has to hold on to the banister with both hands and almost pull himself up. Hell, he couldn't. He can't even pull a wagon without tripping over his feet. It's painful to watch. Sounds like you have a tough son there. Yes, John is plenty stubborn and very determined. I can see that already, but I am concerned about him always getting picked on or left behind as he goes through life. Even now, as a kid, I can watch him play in the neighborhood, and he is consistently last across the finish line. And this bothers you? Yes, it does, said my father. We all know how difficult it is. I can just imagine how much tougher it is. We all know how difficult it is, and I can imagine how much tougher it becomes for someone like John. Is he going to come in last for the rest of his life? Can you answer that, Doc? No, I can't, Mr. Quinn. Only time will tell how your son deals with the challenges he will face. I know you and Shirley will support him emotionally, but our focus right now is on identifying and treating his physical limitations. I am very worried about his eyes, my mom said. They don't appear to be straight. The physician nodded. Our testing did indicate vision. Did indicate vision disturbances, which are a part of the larger diagnostic picture. We'll give you the results of our testing now, and I'm sure you'll have some questions. Mom and Dad said, still with their eyes focused. Sorry about that, everybody. I had lost my spot, and he stood up abruptly hands on the table in front of him, practically defying the doctor to tell him something that made sense. Skip the damn mumbo jumbo. Tell me straight what this thing is and what it has done to my boy. What it's done to my boy. Children with mixed typology such as John has usually exhibit both the tight muscle tone and spastic CP, well as the involuntary movements of athetoid CP, although John does show signs of both spasticity and athetosis. His most obvious feature is ataxia. This generally affects the person's sense of balance and depth perception. The doctor paused, turned a page in the file, and studied it and looked again at Mom and Dad. Dad still had that glazed look of a man bombarded with too many unfamiliar medical words, and the doctor struggled to make this simpler for my parents to understand. My patients often have poor muscle tone and lack of coordination. They tend to walk unsteadily with a wide-based gait, where they place their feet far apart as sort of counterbalance. Toe walking is not uncommon. Yes, I have noticed that is how John walks. Now, Mom said, still clutching her tissue as she reached over to put a calming and cautionary hand on my father's arm, suddenly convincing him to sit back down and listen. Pragmatic as always, she heaved a big sigh, accepted what was, and sought solutions. Will he need braces to give him support? That's something we may consider down the road, Mrs. Quinn, one of the other staff participants, finally added to the conversation. We have also determined the fact that your son's bone age is that of a 3.5-year-old, currently about 1 year behind schedule. What does that mean to us right now? Dad quickly swiveled in his seat to face this person who was a new threat to his sanity. Nothing to the immediate future, Mr. Quinn, although it's something that we will have to keep a close eye on. We want to make sure that John's hip, back, and spine grow as straight as possible to minimize any potential problems he might have as he grows older. But no braces right now. There are some other options we will discuss in depth as soon as we have finished passing along all the full report of our findings. Okay, what else? Mom sighed, pulling a cranky boy bored with his coloring book onto her lap. As you know, we've performed an EEG which gave us a good picture of your son's brain activity. Well, we found an abnormality in his brain waves that we just cannot figure out, said Another doctor, the consulting physician, psychologist. What are you telling me? My boy is retarded like my daughter, barked my father. No, no, not at all. Indications that your son is of normal intelligence overall. The psychologist glanced through his papers. In fact, his math skills proved to be greater than most children his age, and he appears to have a lot of creative ability. There is just a disturbance of function originating in the deeper levels of his brain into the posterior head regions that we cannot explain at this time. The medical term for his condition is called dyremia. He had brain damage in the womb, and he has abnormal brain activity now. Yet you say he's not retarded. Are you sure? Mom said, blinking back more tears. That is correct, Shirley, answered the physician who seemed to be in charge of the meeting. Mentally, John tests out to be very strong. His IQ is fine. I have another physical concern, though, that I need to tell you about. You mean there's more? Dad slowly ran his finger through his hair as he struggled to keep his mind from snapping. Yes, it appears from our test that the right side of your son's face is slightly weaker, and there are small signs of paralysis of the right arm. Paralysis? What the hell is that? You mean my boy is paralyzed? No, my dad was shouting. Not exactly, Ed. It's an impairment of motion. Yes, but slight. The body often compensates to some extent. For example, we didn't notice his left hand is dominant. Therapy will also improve function with handwork and determination, traits that John already shows he has in spades. He should be able to overcome or at least learn to adapt with his limitations in time. Well, I'll tell you one thing, my son is going to be treated like everyone else, no different. Dad was clearly thinking how hard a time Kathy was having in special education classes. His frustration and anger suddenly gave way. Too deep in introspection, everyone was quiet for a moment. Dad seemed to come to some internal decision and quietly asked, "He's not listed as handicapped, is he, Doc?" Well, cerebral palsy is indeed classified as a developmental disability. John's case would not rate as severe. He will not require the use of a wheelchair. He is not mentally defiant and can communicate well. I would say that his symptoms are more on the mild side, although he will require years of therapy and corrective surgeries at minimum. Okay, so in my eyes he is normal with some areas where you have to work on. You can look at it that way, I suppose. We have some great therapists here at Children's Hospital that will do all they can to help John succeed in life. My father stood now with a clear purpose and firm control of his decision. He jabbed his pointed finger into the air inches from the chief physician's chest, and ordered in his policeman's tone of voice, "I don't want to see the words cerebral palsy or handicapped listed anywhere in his medical record. If your doctors label him with that now, it will follow him around for the rest of his life, and I won't have that." Classic dad, although my father wasn't successful in getting the medical records altered as his family. We simply didn't discuss the reasons why I struggled physically. My parents dealt with the symptoms and never discussed the root cause of my condition. Any questions such as, "What's wrong with Johnny?" and soon was immediately squelched, and soon no one brought up my limitations at all. We just did what was required and acted like wearing an up hat or athletic shoes was as normal as brushing your teeth. The internet was not around when I was a kid in the 1970s. If it had been, I could have typed the words, could have typed cerebral palsy into a search engine and come up with all sorts of useful information. I never pursued any additional revenue, nor ever discussed my condition with my friends or with my family or friends. It was just something I had to deal with, adapt to, and keep under control. My parents downplayed the issue of cerebral palsy to ensure that I lived as normal life as possible and was never treated as someone with a handicap by my 4 brothers and sisters. It was just the way I wanted it. Okay, that's the end of chapter 2. I'm sorry for all of the interruptions during this chapter. I love you guys and have one beautiful day.